If you thought you've seen Dana mad, you haven't seen anything yet. The UFC president is certainly no stranger to voicing his opinions. Whether you love him or hate him, when Dana has a viewpoint on a fight, you can bet he's going to share it. Ready to find out which fights made Dana White go red with rage? Let's dive right in. Remember the Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia fight? Man, that was a letdown, and not just any letdown. It was the main event of a critical pay-per-view card. Plus, the UFC was trying to make big moves into the Middle East. With this being their inaugural event in Abu Dhabi in the Zuffa era, everything seemed perfect until the fight itself. Let's just say it didn't quite live up to the hype, and Dana was far from thrilled. Silva seemed to respect Maia's ground game, but ended up turning the fight into a bit of a circus. It was like he was dodging a real confrontation the whole time. Dana White didn't mince words afterward. He tore into Silva, calling the fight an absolute disgrace and an embarrassment for the UFC. I mean, can you imagine? Dana said it was his lowest moment in a decade of running the UFC. But hey, that's not the only fight that made Dana's blood boil. Remember Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis? Talk about an anticlimax. After Ngannou's loss to Stipe Miocic, people were waiting for him to bounce back. Now, you've got these two heavy hitters, Ngannou and Lewis, so someone's got to go down, right? Nope, they practically danced around each other for 3 rounds. Lewis somehow won, but Dana cut him some slack due to a back injury. Now what about Ngannou? Dana went to town on him, criticizing his ego and how he's managed his newfound fame. Dana White thinks Ngannou's ego took him on a joyride he wasn't prepared for. According to Dana, once that ego inflates, your fight game deflates. It's like a cautionary tale of how not to handle stardom in the UFC. I guess Ngannou and Dana will continue to butt heads for a while, huh? If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you're always in the loop. Now, switching gears to the whole Chuck Liddell versus Tito Ortiz saga, that's like a soap opera in the fight world. Chuck Liddell, a legend and a good buddy of Dana's, gets lured out of retirement by none other than Tito Ortiz, who Dana clearly doesn't get along with. And, to add a sprinkle of extra drama, Oscar De La Hoya is in the mix, promoting the fight. Dana thinks Chuck, who is almost 50, shouldn't go back into the octagon, especially to try to get money from Ortiz, who is much younger and in better shape. Dana even took a jab at De La Hoya, calling him a cokehead and questioning his right to tell fighters when to retire. I mean, the animosity is so thick you could cut it with a knife. And when Tito ended up TKOing Chuck and celebrated like he just won the championship, you can bet Dana was fuming. The Tyron Woodley versus Darren Till fight was an interesting cocktail of Dana White's mixed feelings, wasn't it? On one hand, you've got Woodley, the reigning 170-pound champ who, let's be honest, wasn't exactly Mr. Popularity with the fans or Dana. He was skilled, sure, but not exactly a crowd pleaser. However, Darren Till, the fresh and flashy contender, was the kind of guy Dana could see dollar signs around. Leading up to UFC 228, it was pretty clear that the UFC was rolling out the red carpet for him. Dana even said he was excited about Till's potential, loving the matchup stylistically. But Woodley didn't just defend his title though, he also stopped all the Till talk. After knocking him down in the second round, he applies a Darce choke to get the tap. And Dana's face? Priceless. It was like someone had just told him they'd run out of his favorite snack at a movie theater. He didn't waste any time criticizing Woodley afterwards. As we all know, Dana's got a laundry list of grievances with Woodley, and it's not just about his fighting style. First off, there's Woodley's habit of airing his complaints in the media, sometimes even throwing the race card into the mix. That's not something that sits well with Dana, who probably sees it as a headache he doesn't need. Woodley might be a tactical genius in the octagon, but Dana would argue that's part of the problem. His fights against Stephen Thompson and Damian Maia were basically masterclasses in how to nullify unique opponents. Effective, yes, but not exactly thrilling to watch. Dana was particularly vocal after Woodley's bout with Maia at UFC 214, describing it as anything but special. They set a record for the least punches thrown in a title fight, and Dana couldn't have been less pleased. What's interesting is that it's not like Woodley isn't skilled, he's just not giving Dana the kind of sizzling performances that light up pay-per-view sales. But who knows? Maybe Dana was expecting too much? Now, let's talk about the infamous Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. That was a match that had all the makings of an explosive showdown, right? I mean, come on! Adesanya even went out of his way to call out Romero, a fighter most would prefer to avoid. You'd think he was aiming to make a statement or deliver some fireworks, but the reality was a letdown for fans and Dana White alike. When a champion calls out a feared competitor, there's an expectation that they're planning to put on a show. So when Adesanya resorted to a low-risk, low-reward strategy against Romero, you could practically hear the collective groan of disappointment from fans. It was such a cautious performance that you could argue the fight could have gone either way. Not exactly the emphatic statement you'd expect from a champ. As for Dana White, it's like deja vu. Remember that Anderson Silva versus Damian Maia fight? Dana was so disappointed, he probably wanted to bury his head in the sand. Imagine hyping up a main event only to have it be a dud. It's pretty much a promoter's nightmare. The fight had been fiercely hyped, and what did we get? A yawn fest. Whatsoever, Dennis Hallman versus Brian Ebersole fight isn't going down in the MMA history books for its athletic showcase, but rather for Hallman's, let's just say, unique choice of fight attire. A pair of Speedos. I mean, really, before the Reebok and Venom era, fighters had a bit more freedom with their gear, but this was a whole different level of freedom. Dana White was absolutely livid, and can you blame him? The UFC president quickly went from 0 to 100, calling the choice of shorts disgusting. Not only was he grossed out, but he also wondered aloud how in the world his team allowed Hallman to step into the octagon dressed like that. Like, who dropped the ball on that one? He even handed out a one-of-a-kind, thanks for getting those horrifying shorts off TV as soon as possible bonus. That tells you everything about how he felt. If you remember that I said the Adesanya-Romero fight was a waste of time, Dana was definitely mad at himself for not following through with his matchmakers. From the beginning, they didn't like the fight, but Dana let his fan side take over. He has that should-have listened to the pros look on his face the night of the fight. Also, the GSP-Hendricks matchup was a real roller coaster. Even if you're George St. Pierre, one of the titans of the sport, you're not immune to Dana's sharp tongue. The fight was so close, you could cut the tension with a knife. When the decision came down in favor of GSP, jaws dropped. But what really set off Dana was when GSP announced he'd be stepping away from the sport. No, not retiring, but taking a break. That's like leaving the stage at the peak of your performance. Dana didn't mince words in the post-fight presser. He was steaming, saying GSP owed it to the fans, the belt, the UFC, and even Johnny Hendricks to keep fighting. It was like watching a parent scold their honor student child for getting a B on a test. Dana wanted to see a rematch, and he felt GSP walking away just tarnished the title's prestige. Now, let's talk about title fight draws, shall we? Rare as a blue moon in the MMA world, but when it happens in a fight for a vacant championship, it leaves the division in limbo. And Dana, who's all about decisive outcomes and marketable champions, is understandably not thrilled. I mean, who would be? To change gears, let's talk about the fight between Valentina Shevchenko and Priscilla Cachoeira. I mean, who thought that was a good idea? Shevchenko was obviously going to dominate. It was a mismatch from the word go. And dominate she did, landing 217 strikes to Priscilla's 1. Mario Yamasaki, the ref, just stood there, claiming later he wanted to give Priscilla a chance to be a warrior. Really? I mean, come on! That's not being a warrior, that's just getting beat up. That fight basically tanked Yamasaki's career as an official. They were supposed to usher in this new era for the light heavyweight division, but instead, they just disappointed everyone, including Dana. I mean, after 5 lackluster rounds, who wouldn't be ticked off? And then it was ruled a draw? It's like a bad movie with no ending. You know Dana was livid. He basically nixed any chances of a rematch for those two right on the spot during the post-fight interview. Can you believe he's giving Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira the next title shot instead? It's almost like he's saying, you guys blew it. Now, let the pros take over. So, what's your take on Dana's reaction? Fair or foul? Also, if you guys like this rundown, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any future updates.